Hey guys, GameWazer6 here, and back with another video. This is another sketching session. In this sketching session, I'm going to showcase 3 sketches of Mandalay, Deku, and Lady Nagant, who is a recent character introduced to My Hero Academia, and I've talked about her in a previous video. So, first of all, since I'm drawing Mandalay, it got me thinking, at least during the time, of there are plenty of heroes that have quirks that don't necessarily enhance their ability to fight, and we learned early on that the idea within My Hero Academia is, in order to be a hero, you have to have a quirk. So I want to talk about quirks that don't necessarily enhance one's combat abilities whatsoever, and despite that, there's these pro heroes have these quirks, and to me, it just supports the idea that someone could, in theory, do hero work while quirkless. So, the first one we're going to talk about, or I'm going to talk about, is telepath. Unless Mandalay can stop someone from thinking by sending them a barrage of messages, it doesn't do much. Yet, she can quickly communicate with others. There are other ways to do so, like walkie-talkies, radio communicators, like what they're using in Season 6, for example. And it's a one-way street. Someone can communicate directly to her, so as far as communication goes, it's not the best thing. If someone can simply ignore her, it has no effect. And while we're on the Wild Wild Pussycats, let's talk about Search, which is Ragdoll's quirk that was stolen. The quirk is so valuable that, yeah, all for one stolen. If Ragdoll is confronting multiple foes, then she can always keep track of one, because the only requirement is she has to look at whoever. She just has to look at them. Once she looks at them, she can track them as long as within 50 meters of her. Shigaraki used this in order to search for Deku, and also the quirk, because I watched back an episode of Season 6, the quirk also points out one's weaknesses. So because of this, I don't necessarily think the quirk is useless for combat-wise, because if she gets into combat with somebody one-on-one, and she looks at them, she can figure out their weaknesses just by using her quirk to look at them while looking at them. And then, boom. So at the time when I wrote this, because I'm reading off a script, at the time I wrote this, I did not remember that she can look at the weaknesses of whoever she uses search on. So in terms of range, it's obviously far inferior to Lady Nagant's, because Lady Nagant's range is 3 kilometers or 3,000 meters versus her 50. But then again, those are 2 completely different quirks. One's meant for shooting with a long-range weapon, because her quirks, well, it's literally called rifle. So the next quirk I want to talk about is Shinso's brainwashing, which many heroes in the sports festival were jealous that Shinso had such a quirk, because it would be easy to stop villains with it. But if someone knows ahead of time, like if a villain confronts him and they know ahead of time about the quirk, all they have to do is not talk. They can simply refuse to talk and shut down any attempt of Shinso controlling them. Therefore, it just comes down to pure combat. If he's fighting a villain whose quirk enhances their combat abilities, let's say something like a one-for-all explosion, half hot, half cold, dark shadow, you know, all those, his brainwashing is not doing anything if they know what to look for. So the next one I want to talk about is Sir Nane's foresight. The main reason it seems useful is due to all the training that Sir Nane has done. Just the quirk itself poses some issues. It requires one to touch somebody and lock eyes with them. If someone were fighting a long-range combatant, touching them and locking eyes with them would be difficult. If one were to know the requirements, it would make it even more difficult, because they would go out of their way to avoid that. By itself, foresight doesn't increase one's odds of winning the fight or doing hero work. But if you consider the fact that it can only be used once a day on one target, it's even more of a pain. And let's talk about Ojiro's quirk, which is Tail. It adds a little bit of unpredictability to Ojiro's fighting style, but that's about it. It also increases his general maneuverability, but I believe he could achieve those capabilities in theory if he just trained without a tail, hypothetically. So I think the tail might be able to give him extra movement and give him some extra options. I think he can achieve those options if he had certain support items, which probably exist. In the latest episode of Season 6, he actually has a ultimate move in which he restrains somebody with his tail. But in theory, you could do the same thing with, like, Aizawa can do the same thing with his scarf. So, yeah, I don't really think it's special enough that it warrants that someone can just be a hero just because they haven't, and that someone who's quirkless, who goes through physical training, can't achieve similar things just with slightly less options. So with all those quirks out of the way, and those are the quirks that I was able to think of at the time, there might be others that I just simply don't remember. But lastly for this video, since I'm doing sketches of Deku anyway, I want to talk about an updated Deku versus Bakugo. Because in the latest episode, Deku went up against the entirety of Class 1A. Not necessarily in a fight because Deku was trying to get away and they're all trying to stop him, but you get the point. I want to look at how Deku versus Bakugo would go now versus back in Season 3 when they fought after the provisional licensing exam. Bakugo is a natural when it comes to combat, that combined with his development in Season 3 in which he now looks at other heroes he's encountered, and I believe he would likely win. And by looking at others, I'm talking about how Deku takes notes on basically everyone he sees, every hero, his classmates, the people Shigetsu, all of it. And Bakugo, after their fight, said he can do the same thing. Even though we haven't seen him pull out a notebook, I'm sure he's taking mental notes or he's doing something off screen, because I don't know why he would insinuate that he could do something like that if he didn't intend on doing it. So the fight now would be more difficult for Bakugo than when Deku could only use 8% full count, because during the fight, well, he was using 5% and then he went from 5 to 8, but Bakugo was still able to counter him. However, Bakugo's versatility allows him to do similar things to Deku. He can fly around the air, just like Deku can with Float in Air Force / Black Whip. He can create a smoke screen with his explosions, just like with Deku's smoke screen. And in the latest episode, he uses a new move called, I believe it's called a Landmine Blast. Or he just blasts away Deku's smoke screen, so there's that too. Deku's Danger Sense would allow him to predict Bakugo's moves better, but given Bakugo's experience moving around in the air, I think he's more unpredictable in that sense. And also we learn that with Danger Sense, it only senses malice and evil. So, I mean, I don't know if someone's trying to harm him, I don't know if that would count as malice, and therefore make it so Bakugo would be picked up by Danger Sense. But if, for example, if they were just sparring and Bakugo were attacking, I'm assuming in a case like that where Bakugo's not trying to hurt Deku, he's just trying to win. I'm assuming that would mean in that case, Danger Sense wouldn't work. But for example, against Lady Nagant, Danger Sense did work, and I don't believe Nagant had any malice because Deku was able to tell that she wasn't fully intent on capturing him, because if she wanted to, she could have just shot him in the spine and paralyzed him. I mean, she got multiple shots in. She could have done that. So Bakugo mentioned earlier within Season 6 he can keep up with Deku at 30% full counting, and Deku can use 45% for the moment of impact of an attack. So Deku could restrain Bakugo with Black Whip, but I think Bakugo could either blow it up outright or use his explosions to cause Deku to lose control, like, for example, spinning around, using howitzer impact, or doing doing something with his explosions just make it harder for him to be restrained. Honestly, I think Bakugo's natural skills plus his new developments in the series as a whole would allow him to still come out on top. Maybe Deku can create a huge smoke screen and use decoys like he did against Lady Nagant, but I truly think that would either only distract Bakugo for a moment, or he would just think one step ahead, and that wouldn't work. Bakugo wasn't phased in Season 3 when Deku suddenly threw a punch instead of kicking, and he ended up finishing the fight anyway, so I think that just proves Bakugo's adaptability, natural adaptability, and I think he's probably grown both on and off screen. He's grown on screen for sure, but definitely off screen, I think that's improved even more, and his ability to strategize is just better, so I think, honestly, I still think Bakugo would win. I also think Todoroki can beat him one-on-one. I think Yagirosa can beat him one-on-one. I think out of the three, Momo would have the most difficulty because her quirk doesn't enhance her movement. Well, I mean, she could create something to enhance her movement, but usually she doesn't do so. So, I think we'll leave it at that. That's really all I got for this video, so I will see you guys next time.